The Spin-off Podcast Network. This podcast was made with the support of New Zealand On Air.
Labour attempts to get the Prime Minister's latest record low ratings into the Guinness Book of Records look set to fail.
Jim Bolger approaches the back end of 1991, facing the hollowest of vindications.
Jim Bolger's 7% rating is a record low for a sitting Prime Minister in the 16-year history of the One Network News Halen poll. Labour's Manarewa MP George Hawkins says he'll be writing to the Guinness Book of Records to see if Mr Bolger has set an international record. However, Radio New Zealand News has found a lower international rating for a sitting Prime Minister. The then Japanese leader, Noboru Takeshita, suffered a rating of only 4% in 1989.
Bolger had come to power just over a year earlier, projecting a mood of calm. Instead, faced by fresh economic turmoil and propelled by the reforming zeal of Ruth Richardson, his government has delivered radical change on a par with the 6 years of Labour that came before it. In the dust clouds of benefit cuts, the Employment Contracts Act, the mother of all budgets, and some really painful poll numbers, the calculus is clear enough. Show that the stiff medicine applied is delivering real economic recovery, or go down as the leader of the first ever single-term national government.
There is a real revolution going on with ordinary New Zealanders.
It was like watching two parents getting a divorce.
I'm far too fit for the comfort of my enemies.
Democracy had a marvellous victory here in Tauranga today.
Mike Moore described tomorrow's vote as the mother of all elections.
I really flew at Bolger, gave him chapter and verse.
She put the whole of the government at risk.
I remember feeling bereft.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut 2, the story of the Fourth National Government. Episode 3, Bugger the Pollsters. A report in the Times of London says New Zealand in 1991 is defined by unflinching austerity, with scenes of queues for the dole and queues for the food banks. It begins, each day brings new hardship stories and government embarrassment. This is the New Zealand into which the Alliance is born. Forged out of fury at successive Labour and national governments, the new group gets a test drive in an Auckland Regional Council by-election, standing left-wing columnist Bruce Jesson.
The alliance of third parties had its first test and its first success when Bruce Jesson, representing New Labour, Mana Motuhake and the Democrats, won a seat on the council. Bruce Jesson says he's thrilled with the win and believes it's the birth of a new political force.
It shows a real thirst for something new. That we've had six or 7 years of betrayal, deception, hidden agendas, all that sort of stuff from both the major parties. And there's a hunger there for something totally new.
A few days later, the Green Party votes to throw its lot in with the Alliance, despite the reservations of members who recoil at the hierarchical structure. They join New Labour, led by Jim Anderton, who had quit the Labour caucus a couple of years before in disgust at Rogernomics. There's the Democrats, a reincarnation of social credit, and Mana Motuhake, founded and led by former Labour Minister Maturata, supported by Sandra Lee.
Holy moly, it was a big and fractious decision and very difficult.
At the time, Lee is an Auckland City Councillor and President of Mana Motuhake, a party devoted to Māori self-determination and political independence.
I recall we had a big hui in Auckland about it before we made the commitment to join the Alliance. The one and only wonderful Eva Ricard turned up with large numbers of our members from Tainui. Matu was there with our wise grey beards from iwi like Ngā Puhi and Ngāti Maneopoto. And I was there as they thrashed out all day long the merits of joining the Alliance or not. And for me personally, it was horrendous. It was like watching two parents getting a divorce. At the end of the day, the vote was put, the motion was carried, we agreed to join the Alliance.
And perfectly timed for the new Alliance, a by-election in a high-profile seat.
The Prime Minister is not confident of a national win in the race for the Tamaki electorate on February the 15th. Jim Bolger surprised a post-cabinet news conference this afternoon when he refused to say his party would win the by-election. A seat which was vacated by former Prime Minister Sir Rob Muldoon has been national for 31 years. Latest opinion polls show the Alliance breathing down National's neck with just 2 weeks to go.
I'm just being up front and telling you as I see it. There's evidence all around the world that governments with very large majorities in by-elections have lost seats.
So it wouldn't surprise you if you did lose?
No.
Well, Tamaki is an unusual electorate. We used to have, the organisation was nicknamed the Tamaki Mafia, and there was a group within there which were, Muldoon stalwarts, and they controlled it almost like Chicago Democrats.
This is Rob Eaddy, Bolger's Chief of Staff. He'd taken some time out to work on the campaign.
We had high hopes that a former All Black captain would get the nomination, David Kirk, and he missed out.
Local party members instead choose Muldoon's preferred option, Clem Simic. He runs almost as a protest candidate, pledging to send a message to Wellington. But if you really want that message to be heard, say the Alliance, their confidence growing by the day, get on board.
The Alliance coalition seems to be on the crest of a wave, with polls showing the Alliance candidate Chris Leach is ahead of rivals in the Tamaki by-election.
Well, we didn't have large amounts of party funding, but we had great campaign organisers and we had troops. So we showed from the outset that we had campaign strength, and that made the Alliance in particular worrisome for the two old parties that had reigned supreme for so long.
Bolger's admission that they could lose has not gone down well. Here's Michael Wall, the advertising guru, who at this point has returned into the Bolger fold as his chief press secretary.
He said, we can quite possibly lose this, which enraged the Tamaki Mafia, but it may have shaken something loose,
I'm astonished that the Prime Minister went as far as to say that before the election.
Here's Muldoon.
It means that he's not thinking very clearly on the matter. It tells me that he's very worried.
National has a huge majority in Parliament, that's true. But this is Tamaki. For the Prime Minister, it's a very big deal.
Jim was in a vulnerable position. Poll ratings for Jim Bolger and for the party were very low at that time.
The effect of the Alliance winning Tamaki, that would have cost Jim Bolger his job.
Would it?
Oh, yeah.
The other big loser from an Alliance victory? Labour. And there's nothing quite like the sniff of despair to spur on collaborative energies.
You had these weird allegiances where Ross Armstrong, our divisional Auckland chairman, became very close and friendly with Helen Clark because we had a mutual interest at stake. And that was to keep the Alliance out, because they were looking like they would take the bloody seat.
Ross Armstrong first meets Helen Clark, then Labour Deputy Leader, while the by-election campaign is in full swing. They're introduced at the wedding of Paul Holmes and Hinemoa Elder on an Auckland hotel rooftop.
Ross was a very unusual man. He was a fishmonger. He used to sell his fish by an early mobile phone, which is about the size of the suitcase. But he also had a PhD from Trinity in Dublin, and he was quite a brilliant guy.
Armstrong and Clark agree to catch up and discuss their shared problem, the Alliance. Armstrong would later tell Dennis Welch about the handover, a rendezvous in the car park of a Green Lane bottle store, at which Armstrong passes to Clark a floppy disk containing canvassing data.
Labour couldn't afford to get them to have it, and we couldn't either. So I think there was some sharing of data, door-knocking data and stuff like that. We freely hand over to the others where you need to work and to get your vote out.
Does Clark remember that tactic?
Not with any clarity at all, but it was tough, right? They really were very good at campaigning.
A few days before the vote, Bolger speaks to party members at the Tamaki Yacht Club on Tamaki Drive.
And I'm here to say that after a little more than a year of hard work, yes, a difficult year, sometimes a painful year, we have made it. Business people, economists and analysts all over the world agree. Of all the countries in the Western Bloc, New Zealand is in the best shape to take advantage of the end of the recession. Our economy is like a coiled spring. When world trade picks up, even slightly, this country will be the first to spring into life.
They lost, but they're still celebrating. The fledgling Alliance coalition came close to unseating National in the Blue Ribbon Tamaki seat yesterday. The result, National 7,469, the Alliance 6,223 and Labour 1,937. National's majority 1,246.
There was never a real chance that those people would take the almighty leap over to the Alliance, because having been national people, they must have been predominantly national. I think they would have found that just too much of a change to go to a socialist party, not just socialist, extreme left wing.
This is the victorious Clem Simic.
In a year or so, we will be seen to be a very, very good government. We've got the things in place. Even though we've annoyed a few people, we have got things in place so that the economy can grow and we can start moving.
The Alliance is defeated, but delighted.
Any objective observer who watched that campaign knew that the Alliance, this fledgling 10-week-old bunch of latter-day Luddites, knocked both Labour and National organisationally into a cocked hat, and they knew it.
This is Jim Anderton.
The National Party in the last week were in a state of panic, and they brought in everything but the kitchen sink. As I've said before, I thought they were going to start building hydro dams on the Tamaki River to save the seat.
Labour puts on a brave face, but the lesson, as Helen Clark later recalls, is clear.
There's no God-given right for a major party to stay a major party. You have to earn that.
And then there are the thoughts of one Tamaki constituent.
If they have got anything other than totally closed minds, the message they will get from the people of Tamaki is that we don't like your health policies, we don't like your superannuation scheme such as it is, and we're not all that keen on this totally hands-off free market economic policy. Now, those thoughts were coming through loud and clear all the way through the campaign.
For Muldoon, it's just about the outcome he'd sought. Soon after, he becomes seriously ill. Within 6 months of the by-election, the former Prime Minister is dead. Colleagues place a lily, famously his favourite flower, on his former desk in Parliament. It's a place he'd inhabited, sometimes commanded, sometimes stalked, for 31 years, including 9 as Prime Minister. A few nights before his death, unable to sleep, Muldoon phones talkback radio just after midnight. He surveys the state of things, bemoans health reforms and asset sales, ending with,
"The one thing I can say about my health is that I'm far too fit for the comfort of my enemies. They haven't got me down yet."
In putting the Alliance together, Jim Anderton had courted a number of MPs, including Winston Peters, the loquacious member for Tauranga. He'd been chucked out of Bolger's cabinet at about the same time the Alliance was emerging. Peters has decided the Alliance isn't for him, but not because he's about to fall back into line with the National Party. He denounces his rivals.
When you make a statement or a promise in politics, you keep it.
He denounces big business.
Outrageous, illegal, fraudulent dealings.
He denounces the BNZ sale.
Here I'm fighting a battle for democracy, accountable government, and for a bit of transparency and honesty.
And he keeps the heat up on superannuation.
Because frankly, this is an issue in which there has been considerable bad faith, considerable reneging on promises.
When the time comes, Bolger is overseas. The motion to expel Winston Peters is put by the Deputy, Don McKinnon.
It is based on a lack of trust and confidence in Mr. Peters. It's based on the inability of the caucus to work with him as a member. And, of course, as a colleague, we feel we have a wider responsibility to 3.5 million people not to be a government that is constantly divided from within, constantly fighting amongst itself, constantly being accused by one of its own number of being dishonest.
The motion is seconded by Bill English, an act which, some have since speculated, remained clear in Peter's mind for decades to come. For McKinnon, it's done with a heavy heart. He is not just the deputy leader, but also Peter's former flatmate from the years in opposition. They were part of a quartet known as the Salamanca Road Club, a shared house just opposite Kelburn Park which had become the stuff of Wellington politics legend.
I think it was entirely overrated, but at the same time, there were four of us who obviously were pretty close together, and that was Paul East, Winston Peters and Philip Burden. And Philip decided to buy this flat in Salamanca Road. I'm not too sure when he bought it, but the other three of us volunteered to be his tenants, and we all ended up there together. So we were there probably from 81 right through till 1990. We've always been very close.
He basically was seen as a bit of a gadfly. He wasn't really taken seriously.
Ruth Richardson has never had much time for Winston Peters.
He certainly strutted leadership stuff, but it was all style and no substance, and that was never going to cut it.
Bolger, on the other hand.
Well, Winston, of course, had ambitions to be leader. Had he played his cards differently, he probably would have been leader.
Winston could have been Prime Minister for want of himself. You know, he could never quite discipline himself to use the channel to that destination.
Jenny Shipley.
I think in the end Jim just ran out of patience with him, and it was quite personal between the two of them.
There you go. You're dealing with human nature, and we're all imperfect.
It was just frankly inevitable. You could feel it inching toward that moment.
The National Caucus has finally dumped Tauranga MP Winston Peters, leaving his political future uncertain.
Just over a year after Peters' expulsion from Cabinet, 50 of National's 65 MPs have now voted to turf him out of caucus.
This is indeed a sad day for the National Party and politics in New Zealand. We as a party have had since 1936 a belief in freedom of speech. For decades, it, more than anything else, has distinguished us from the Labour Party. Today, that proud tradition was trampled on. I'm not concerned for myself, but where will this all end? I will not be silenced in this or any other way.
The young MP for Tasman, Nick Smith, explains it this way.
He's like a football player who spends half his time scoring home goals, the other half of the time knocking out his own team members. Look, if he wants to play, that's fine, but he shouldn't pretend to play on our team.
I'm going to go on with this campaign of disclosure with respect to certain business interests in this country and their connections with politics. And we're going to lay before New Zealand, as I have sought to do these last 3 months in a most hostile environment. I have been restrained because of my membership of caucus. That will all change from here on in.
And here's commentator and broadcaster Bill Ralston.
What I find the saddest thing of all is that it's in many ways a sort of replay of the poor leadership that we saw in the last Labour government, when David Lange, unable to control Jim Anderton, unable to control Roger Douglas, almost clipped both wings of his party and reduced it to a mere shadow of its former self.
After a protracted legal battle, Peters resigns from Parliament, sparking a by-election. Polling at this time has him topping the preferred Prime Minister category with 31%, ahead of Labour's Mike Moore on 19%. Jim Bolger, 6%. Peters stands in Tauranga as an independent. None of the other major parties puts up a challenger.
Political history was made on Saturday night when more than 11,000 Tauranga people voted to return Winston Peters as their MP.
In second place, with 271 votes, is someone called Greg from the Magillaguddy Serious Party.
Democracy had a marvellous victory here in Tauranga today.
Listen, the political hierarchies of this country are dinosaurs. They don't deserve to exist as far as I'm concerned, and either they adapt or they perish.
This is Michael Laws speaking to RNZ on the night of the by-election. The celebration in Tauranga continues, and the wine flows.
Oh, God, I got drunk. Completely trolleyed.
Laws goes on TV to talk to Bill Ralston, who asks him,
"Well, what do you think Jim Bolger will think of this?" And to which I replied, "Who cares what Jim Bolger thinks?" Or where's that effect? And then staggered off, exit stage right, and chucked my bloody guts up in the nearest dunny.
The MP for Hawke's Bay has been a constant splinter in the backside of Bolger and Co., criticising from the backbenches and grabbing attention with enterprises like advising his constituents how to dodge the superannuation surcharge.
And then, all hell broke loose. So that was when caucus were going to expel me. No question about that.
Laws will only save his skin after taking the advice of Paul Holmes and appearing on the broadcaster's show with a grovelling apology. Peters asks his old mate to join him in a new political movement, but Laws is still backed by local party supporters and, to the surprise of many, will again contest Hawke's Bay as the national candidate in 1993.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take our country and our democracy back.
On a wintry Sunday afternoon at the Alexandra Park Racecourse in Auckland, Peters addresses a crowd of about 2,000.
And that is why this party, launched on this historic day, is called New Zealand First.
There are just 4 months to go to a general election.
All but a few feel strongly that needless, harsh sacrifices over a long period of restructuring have simply failed. Major assets have been stripped, for the most part sold well below value to people who in many cases neither speak our language or share our values.
The crowd never really caught fire, but it pleased the faithful and is sure to sweep up those, such as this rally-goer, who are looking for something to pin their hopes to.
I'm not saying Winston Peters is the man for me. What I'm saying is the Business Roundtable owns both the other parties, and I don't think we've got any other choices at all than Winston, because nobody else individually is offering themselves at this time. And the thought of putting New Zealand first is a very novel one, and that one that will interest a very large number of New Zealanders, I'm very sure.
Is he coming on the podcast?
Who?
Winston.
I really hope so. Let us know, Mr. Peters. We'd love you on. Very happy to swing round and pick you up. Another political group has been brewing too.
Two former cabinet ministers, one from National and one from Labour, have teamed up to form a new ginger group. Roger Douglas was a Labour finance minister and Derek Quigley was an associate finance minister in a national government. They formed a group called ACT, the Association of Consumers and Taxpayers, and they're arguing for smaller government.
The national government, says Roger Douglas, has lost its mojo.
I think they're really having another cup of tea like we had in 1988, 89 and 90.
So are you making a political comeback?
No, that's not the intention. This is essentially a ginger group which will be saying to politicians on all sides of the House, you should get on with the reform program.
While Peters is winning headlines and topping polls on the campaign trail in Tauranga, Jim Bolger is in just about the best place he can be, Russia. It's the first visit by a New Zealand Prime Minister for 60 years. On the agenda, a $250 million butter debt. And, it turns out, military hardware.
Mr. Bolger steered a meeting between himself, dairy board negotiators and the Russian Deputy Finance Minister to a commitment to iron out a deal acceptable to both sides. The butter debt will be progressively repaid at the same time as sales to Russia continue.
Dairy board and the ANZ were owed huge amounts of money from Russia. And under the dairy board deal, that's how we got bloody Lada cars into New Zealand. It was paying off some of the debt by importing these bloody wheelbarrows with 4 wheels.
Rob Eaddy, Jim Bolger's Chief of Staff, is in the room in Moscow.
The debt, they said, we can pay as much as we can, but would you consider a nuclear submarine? Bolger said afterwards to us, actually, what a bad idea, because they'd had those brownouts or blackouts in Auckland with the electricity cable had gone. Could have had a nuclear sub generating electricity in the harbour.
Bolger's Moscow visit comes as Russia under Boris Yeltsin is struggling for stability following the collapse of the Soviet Union. There's some optimism in the geopolitical air, with the Cold War over and a new world order taking shape. New Zealand foreign policy has been resetting too. Soon after the 1990 election, after Desert Storm, Bolger has that conversation with President Bush Sr. on the phone. Then, on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York in September 1991, Bolger and Bush meet over a whiskey at the Waldorf Astoria. Bolger says that he'd repeal the nuclear ship ban except for the fact that the opposition would just reinstate it when they get back into power. Bush hints at a ray of hope in our relations, and that follows soon after, with the removal of nuclear weapons from American ships.
Seems to me that it might clear the way for resolution of differences we've had with some countries. I'm thinking of New Zealand and other countries where we've had, everyone knows, great differences on this.
1992 ends badly for Bush, who gets booted from the White House. And it's a stinker for Queen Elizabeth too.
In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an annus horribilis.
At least the new president is chirpy.
On this day, with high hopes and brave hearts in massive numbers, the American people have voted to make a new beginning.
Several months later, Bill Clinton will signal a thaw in relations with New Zealand, leading to a resumption of political and military contacts. Europe takes strides towards closer integration. Trade barriers are dismantled. New Zealand is elected to a non-permanent seat on the Security Council of an increasingly confident United Nations. The Oslo Accords bring a surge in optimism for resolution in the Israel-Palestine conflict, grounded in a two-state solution.
The children of Abraham, the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael, have embarked together on a bold journey. Together, today, with all our hearts and all our souls, we bid them shalom, salam, peace.
Back at home, Ruth Richardson pushes on. Asset sales continue, the BNZ is flicked off, so is NZ Rail. The reforming zeal extends to education, where Lockwood Smith has introduced a loan scheme for tertiary students to waves of protest. And while New Zealand is enjoying the new soap opera on TV2, Shortland Street, set in an Auckland clinic straddling the public-private divide, the health reforms are not going down well at all. Part charges for inpatients are ditched, and Bolger puts his Mr. Fix-It in charge.
The anticipated cabinet reshuffle announced today has taken the health portfolio away from Simon Upton and given it to cabinet hardman Bill Birch.
As one might expect, the Prime Minister was emphatic that the changes weren't the results of threats to his leadership.
Absolutely no, and your question shows what a biased view you come with. Absolutely no.
The internal organs of the beehive are trembling with tension, largely between Ruth Richardson and a National MP who, alongside the likes of Bill Birch and Clem Simic, has a name that could be riding into town in a Western matinee. Wyatt Creech.
The idea is simply to reduce the hassle, red tape that people have to go to for the tax system.
Richardson repeatedly locks horns with Creech, often across the cabinet table. By her account, they are the two most stubborn people in the room. Creech regards Richardson's approach as rigid and ideological. She finds his ideas convoluted, inconsistent. It's a poisonous internal battle. Bolger decides to try something. In that reshuffle that's seen Bill Birch made Minister of Health, Bolger had another, bigger plan.
In one of my many fights with Wyatt Creech on matters revenue, Bolger decided one night, he called me in and said, I'm going to split the portfolio. I'm going to have a treasurer and a Minister of Finance.
Richardson is not having it.
Well, that was red rag to a bull over my dead body. I really flew at Bolger, gave him chapter and verse as to why this must not occur. I mean, the job of the Minister of Finance is to be the Minister of Reform. And we had to do that in a way that was, gold standard. No sort of half-assed reforms like, half treasurer, half minister of finance.
Do that, she says, and I'll quit.
And I said, I will not fly on one wing. I'm either going to fly on two wings or not at all. So you decide.
As the 93 election draws closer, positive economic signals are emerging.
A report from the OECD with some positive assessments of the New Zealand economy. The report says the economy is expected to grow by 3.1% in 1993, giving it the second highest growth rate in the OECD.
But it's not reaching every part of New Zealand.
A Wellington soup kitchen, which has been dishing up meals every day since the 1930s, says it's just given dinner to the largest number of people ever, and that includes the Depression years.
I used to have a family, a home, a job. I gave my family security, a house to live in and an education. Now I'm 50, have no job, got no security, and I got no home. I can't even pay the bloody rent.
The Prime Minister and his advisers decide they need to snap out of reactive politics. The Path to 2010 is launched. It's put together by David Kirk. The former All Black captain had been drafted into Bolger's office after getting rejected by the local National Party in Tamaki. The glossy A4 document sets out ambitions for growth, plans for infrastructure and exports, and a slew of other lofty goals. And with the economy on the up, it's time to share that forward-looking message around the country. It's time, says Bolger's spin doctor-in-chief, to set sail on a goodwill tour. Michael Wall had got the idea from working on a campaign in California for a Democratic governor. Journalists would be buzzed around the country alongside Bolger on a bus or a plane.
Where we found out the great benefit was that we got great local coverage in the local papers, so that in a way which we hadn't been getting previously. So that was the advantage it produced. Also, it was actually quite good because the journalists actually did see it, got out there and got a better feel for the country too.
Here's Rob Eaddy.
We hired a plane and started down the South Island. And the green shoots of recovery, to use a horrible bloody cliche, they were evident big time down there. And we could see that despite bloody hard stuff following on from the mother of all budgets, the economy was starting to recover from that very strongly.
The plane was called the Spirit of Recovery, which was a bit embarrassing once when it broke down in Palmerston North.
And by the time the election came along, the recovery had arrived at the place that matters most, Auckland.
Economic growth, which 3 years ago was the worst in the OECD, is now the second best and set to climb further still.
The Alliance coalition has made big gains in the latest public opinion poll. The Alliance rates 17% in an NBR Consultus poll. Support for Labour has dropped 3 points to 32%, while National has also lost 3, dropping to 39%.
Jim Anderton is making no bones about his bid to annihilate the Labour Party, and Labour's now concentrating resources on attempting to destroy the credibility of Alliance policy.
There is a real revolution going on with ordinary New Zealanders, and we are saying we are going to do something about the crisis we're facing in unemployment, in health, care and education, and in the undercurrent of unrest and serious distress that so many New Zealanders are feeling about their own country, about the way our society is going, and the inequality of opportunity and wealth in this country.
Real leadership is based on credibility and some moral authority. Real leadership can offer some vision and some direction and some hope. And people will respond if you don't say one thing and do the other.
He worked with Roger Douglas. He said he was a close friend of Roger Douglas and supported Roger Douglas. Now he thinks that's not popular. So he said, please forget and forgive me for my 6 years. I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Polls out this week show a dramatic narrowing in the gap between the two sides in the electoral reform debate.
Right, yes, electoral reform.
With only around 2 weeks to run until the election day referendum, which will decide how New Zealand is governed, the MMP lobby now finds itself neck and neck with the backers of the existing first-past-the-post system.
Alongside the general election in November 1993, there's something bigger in play, something longer lasting: whether to change the electoral system. To be clear, we haven't forgotten about this. On the contrary, we want to get into it properly. So we've pulled it over and parked it up. We'll return to the extraordinary story of MMP in episode 4. In the election itself, National grows in confidence through a steady-as-she-goes campaign. People seem to be responding to that spirit of recovery message. And then something terrible happens. A really good poll and a jubilant campaign event.
I think it was a Helen poll. Had us out, I think it was double digits. It might have been 11, or maybe, I don't know. I'm wishful thinking, but it was significant.
Too good.
It was too good.
Well, on our way, we'll never look back. We're picking up pace and we're on the right track in the heartland.
And we had this rally in Auckland at the RTS Centre, I think it was.
This is Rob Eaddy. National strategists have been urging sobriety. Research has made it clear they're battling perceptions of being arrogant and uncaring.
And I was watching this on TV and I said, Jesus, this looks real bad. It looks cocky. You've got them, I think, partying and dancing in the aisles of the RTS Centre where we're going to win the election. Well, folks back home watching this on the news clip said, yeah, we don't think Labour deserves to get back in, but you bastards have made our life miserable.
It looks like a victory parade.
Everybody was full of excitement. They were certain we were going to win. And all of a sudden the voters said, well, no, you're not. Well, they almost said that. They got very close to saying that.
The general election has failed to produce a clear leader, and New Zealand is now facing political confusion. Many of the 99 seats have very close results and will depend on the counting of special votes.
Each of the two big parties, the supertankers that have delivered 9 years of mega reform, wins just over a third of the total vote. On the night, it looks like a hung parliament. So much for those healthy poll leads. Here's Bolger in his election night speech.
What I could have said was bugger the pollsters.
Bugger the pollsters. Yes, bugger the pollsters. No, that's absolutely right. We almost lost it.
Mike Moore gives a powerful speech, but one he'll later come to regret.
It'll be a long night for Mr. Bolger and Miss Richardson, but it won't be as long and as cold a night as it has been for all the young people in this country since they were elected. It'll be a long and cold night for Mr. Bolger, but not as cold and lonely as it has been for 1 in 4 teenagers who are out of work.
He's not wrong that there are a lot of New Zealanders suffering, but at this moment, people seem to be pining for a different kind of message.
It'll be a long and cold night for Miss Richardson and Mr. Bolger, but not as long and as cold as it has been for the pensioners.
After the special votes roll in, National has 50 seats. Labour has 45. New Zealand First and the Alliance, 2 apiece. That leaves a majority of 1. But once a Speaker is appointed, it will be a deadlock. National approaches David Lange, who is still on the Labour backbenches. Would he like to be Speaker in the cause of stability? Nope. Next they try the Labour MP for Eastern Māori.
Peter Tapsell was out on his farm up the East Coast when I got hold of Peter and said I had an interesting suggestion for him. And Peter, being the absolutely honourable gentleman that he was, agreed.
Maybe we should have been clearer that he shouldn't do it.
Helen Clark.
That would have forced National to negotiate. Whether it would have negotiated with us or with New Zealand First or with the Alliance, who knows? But it would have needed to negotiate. And Peter Tapsell taking that seat let them off that hook.
Well, I think when the election night result became clear, my initial reaction was that the juggernaut had halted. And that really, I think, summed up the expressions that I'd had from people in my constituency who felt very much that they were on the receiving end of pretty massive and very quick-moving decisions.
This is Labour MP Leanne Dalziel, summing up the election shortly afterwards.
And I think that the result of the election has given them a feeling of respite, that they can now relax a little bit, that the overwhelming weight of change has been slowed right down. And I think that's actually quite positive.
New Zealand has also voted to introduce proportional representation, and it's going to be messy.
We're in a very interesting period.
Political commentator Colin James.
We can't even predict when the next election will be. We can't predict the shape of the major parties exactly. We can't predict how many or what minor parties will emerge and what areas they will contest. For a commentator, this is just about heaven.
As for putting a cabinet together, there is one decision that towers above the rest.
We only scraped home by quite narrowly then. And clearly Jim felt that he couldn't keep Ruth.
Bill Birch.
So he looked around for who else could do the finance job, and he ended up asking me if I'd do it, and I said, "No, yeah, why not?"
If Longy had called for a cup of tea, Bolger is putting the kettle on.
Bolger essentially said to me, "You can have any other portfolio but finance," effectively. I think there was transport and justice and whatever. And I was very clear. I said, "No, I'm not in politics for portfolios. I'm in politics for policy."
Very determined personality, and she determined what she wanted was correct and what the leader wanted was irrelevant. Well, there you go. That's life.
They were genuinely surprised that I would turn down a ministerial portfolio, that I would turn down a continuing political career on account of principle. They obviously didn't know me well enough.
It's very important for a manager to be able to sell the budget, to be able to explain why changes are necessary, even though they may hurt, and to try and get the reasons across. Well, Ruth wasn't able to do that.
I always say to people who want to be politicians, your political capital is like a glass of water. You drink from it every day. You drink for good purpose or for no purpose at all. Drink from it for good purpose, because in the end, you will spend your political capital. And I knew what I wanted to spend my political capital on. But history will record we won that election. While it was close, it wasn't a defeat. And for all the naysayers who say that you can't take tough political decisions and live to tell the tale, you can. And very much aided by the economy that was getting back on its feet. You know, people started to feel the benefits of the reform. So while some would say, limped to the victory line, we got victory nevertheless. So I saw the result in 1993 as a seal of approval.
Richardson wants just one thing at this point: to chair the select committee overseeing the Fiscal Responsibility Bill. This will put into law a whole bunch of fiscal updates, which quickly become known by their acronyms: PREFU, BFU, HIFU, KungFu, not KungFu. Essentially, requirements for governments to open the books at regular points, to entrench a fiscal rectitude, or at very least, require explanation when there are deviations from the path.
Frankly, her gift of the fiscal responsibility legislation is foundational in terms of New Zealand voters. No one should be left in that position as an incoming government, that they are presented with books that are simply a misrepresentation of where we as a small country are.
In Labour, meanwhile, manoeuvres are afoot. Many MPs reckon that Mike Moore, in his election night speech, has not read the room.
I have to say that at the time, I didn't see it as badly as others did. I mean, it was an emotional moment, right? It was an emotional moment. But again, it wasn't a moment for television. You know, it's going to be a long, hard, cold night for Mr. Bolger. I mean, it still rings in your ears, and it most certainly was damaging for Mike.
It'll be a long and cold night for Mr. Bolger, but not as cold and lonely as it has been for 1 in 4 teenagers who are out of work.
Was his fate sealed then, do you think? Was the changeover?
Probably for the majority of the caucus, yes.
As Helen Clark mounts a leadership challenge, emotions continue to run high.
This is the future of the Labour Party. This is about more than personalities now. I'm very angry. I wasn't.
until today. I will not have people coming around my home in tears. I will be treated with more respect. I have more respect for myself and the truth and the party. And I have more to say about some of the silly things that have been said.
The Labour Party has its first woman leader, with the election this morning of Helen Clark by a substantial margin over the incumbent Mike Moore.
Recent days have been very tense and difficult for us all, and my job now is to move to heal the wounds which have been created and move forward into a new age of politics which is constructive for Labour. The Labour Party has had its moments in the past, and I know it will come through this particular moment as a strong force in New Zealand politics.
Had it not been for the Labour Party, I may well have been a 25-stone redundant freezing worker in North Auckland who read poetry.
For some time, the recriminations linger. Moore's supporters are furious about the coup.
Politics is never for the faint-hearted. You know, there's always been abuse and undermining and innuendo and false statements, and in the end you have to build the resilience to deal with it.
A jump to the left in Labour and the removal of Ruth Richardson hinted a shift in the axis of New Zealand politics.
Sir Roger Douglas says the changes in both the main parties mean an end to economic change, and he may have to get back into politics himself.
It frankly is pointless for New Zealanders to try to distinguish between any of the four parties. They basically represent that same old recipe that got us into trouble in 84.
News Talk ZB. Newsflash.
It's 9:22. I'm Paula Penfold. Finance Minister and Selwyn MP Ruth Richardson has announced she's calling a press conference for 9:30 this morning.
It's July 14, 1994. Bastille Day, a fortnight after Bill Birch has announced the first budget surplus for 17 years.
This is the first time since 1978 that the adjusted financial balance has been in surplus.
It's also, so it happens, the 10-year anniversary of the election of the fourth Labour government.
My resignation will be effective from midnight on Monday the 18th of July, and I will advise the Speaker accordingly today.
Richardson is just 44 years old.
Morning to you, Ruth.
Good morning.
When did you decide to quit?
Well, Andrew and I have taken stock over the last 8 months. We've had more of a normal family life, and that's been pretty contagious and has been a very big influence in our decision. It has been a hard decision, but I have been very positive about that decision. So I guess positive is the best note. I'm positive about New Zealand. Much better prospects now. I'm positive about what has been achieved. I'm positive we can win the by-election, and Andrew and I are very positive about our future.
All the best.
Thanks, mate.
Ruth Richardson, and you heard her here first, and we appreciate that. Many requests, as you can well understand. She rang us first.
She put the whole of the government at risk because there was no certainty we were going to win the election.
Bolger's saying that because he's wanting to scapegoat me. I wasn't putting the government at risk. We had won by one, and we were going to continue to be a government of majority of one.
She was prepared to provide the opportunity for Labour to win to satisfy her own ego.
He saw me as doctrinaire, and he never understood what motivated me in terms of policy and why I was in politics, because he would always have stayed around no matter what the mood music. I wasn't going to stay around no matter the mood music. If the mood music wasn't reform, I was out, because my rationale for being in politics had gone.
It was one of my deepest regrets that she did not continue, and it was an even greater regret that she resigned. I mean, Ruth is a dearest friend of mine. I love her to bits. I respect her entirely, and I wanted her to be there, for a future that I might, by then, it was at least a possibility that I might have been part of, but that wasn't to be. So it was a rough time. I remember feeling bereft when she left, and I mean genuinely bereft. partly because what we'd all been through as a group, but it was a big lost opportunity for New Zealand. Look, put what you think of Ruth aside, she has one of the best minds economically you will find in this country, and a resilience that deserves to be respected. You don't have to agree with her, but it's rare to find people who can think on an extremely broad range and then technically deliver. And Ruth Richardson was one of those people.
I did what I wanted to do in politics. I left with my head held high.
And so, another by-election. This time, however, it's about more than just sending a message. The fate of the government hangs in the balance. If National loses the seat, says Bolger, it'll be rendered impotent. The whole Parliament may as well pack up and go home. In 1993, New Zealand had elected a government with the narrowest of majorities. But at the same time, it decided that it didn't want strong majority governments to be the norm at all. It has voted for a proportional electoral system. In the next episode, we look at the roundabout journey to that moment, a decision that would change the shape of our politics, and the wild story of New Zealand's first MMP election.
They had betrayed the people.
What could be the most major constitutional change in New Zealand's history.
Compromise, corruption and chaos.
It signals a new beginning in New Zealand politics.
If you want to get rid of National, then only one party can do that.
Shit. Winston lost his rag.
It was the death zone, political death zone. Death zone, death zone.
That's next on Juggernaut 2, the story of the fourth National government. Juggernaut 2, the story of the fourth National government, is written and presented by me, Toby Manhire, for The Spin-Off, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. The producer is Jen Follett, the audio editor and sound designer is Te Aihe Butler, the researcher is Henry Cook, graphic design by Lauren Marie Stewart, archive Maddie Walker, and the executive producers are Sophie Dowson and Duncan Grieve. Archival audio in this episode is from Ngā Taonga Sound and Vision. You can read a full list of sources and other written material that digs deeper into the story by clicking the link in the show notes. Thanks to Amber Easby, Mad Chapman, Anna Rafferty Connell, Isaiah Tour, Ben Fagan, Liam Ratana, and everyone at The Spin-Off. To Steve Russell and The Public Good. Kia ora, this is Toby Manhire. Thank you for listening to Juggernaut. I hope you're enjoying this series. A lot of work from a small but talented group of people went into making this podcast, and we're extremely grateful to New Zealand On Air for supporting the project. It also couldn't have happened without the support of our members. If you like what we do here at The Spin-Off and would like to see more projects like Juggernaut out in the world, then please consider becoming a Spin-Off member. Visit thespinoff.co.nz/members to help us do more of the work you value.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.